Blake Swiner. I'm the Natural Resources Specialist here. I started in May, so I'm still pretty new. I'm still trying to get familiar with the area, and this is my first shiftless dialogue. And since I'm working the front desk, I probably can't see all of it, but I'm still excited to hear what I can. This talk is part of the Ralph Nuzum Lecture Series, or a grant by the Ralph E. Nuzum Kickapoo Reforestation Fund, and it's supported by Avid Talks. Today we're excited to welcome back Brad Steinmetz, who's a local historian. Brad is a retired teacher and a published author with 3 books on the LaFarge Dam Project. Today he will be talking about the history of the LaFarge Dam Project and this display of a poster from 1962 that includes some of the flood control plans from that project. We're very excited to have him here. Please welcome Brad Steinmetz.
Thank you.
Take it away.
My wife says I have to take off my cap. Can I leave my cap on?
It's fine.
I really want to see this. Anyway, a couple of questions to start with. How many of you have heard me give a dam talk before? Well, just a few of you. I do a lot of newcomers, okay? All right, just to warn you, there could be some snooze time available. How many of you, here's another question, how many of you or your family were affected by the Farge Dam Project? Oh, that's unusual. We usually have some families that were affected. We'll go more modern with this one. How many of you have been affected by a Kickapoo River flood? There we go. There we go. Yeah, they're that common. I would just like to point out a couple of things that I would like you to kind of maybe focus on after the talk is over, is our new Discovery Center. It's a fantastic facility, right as you walk in there. And in the far northeast corner, there is some information that kind of goes along with what we'll be talking about with the dam project. And there's a fantastic flood pole that shows the elevations of the Kickapoo Valley monster floods and that kind of thing. And there's also a little place where you can sit down. There's a screen, a touch screen, and you can bring up photos and a lot of facts about some of these things that we're going to be talking about. So you can kind of get an idea as to what's out there. And a lot of nice exhibits that's just opened in the last year, and a lot of good stuff that you can take a look at if you haven't done it yet. Okay, so let's move on here. And I just mentioned my book here. I have written 3 books, but only one was specifically on the dam project, and that's this one called That Dam History. I have a few copies here, but it's also for sale out at the gift shop too. So just to do that. The other 2 books that I wrote are on LaFarge history, and they do contain a lot of information about the dam projects, especially volume 2. It does contain a lot about that. And the dam history book basically just looks at the project. I tried to stay neutral, which is hard to do. Tried to stay neutral on that one. And then in volume 2 of my LaFarge history, I get into the pros and cons and how I divided the village and all of that kind of stuff. So you kind of see that one from there, so you get some ideas as to how it was going. The project actually begins back in 1935, when there was a great flood in the Kickapoo River. This is a photo of LaFarge during that flood. that appeared on the front cover of an issue of the Milwaukee Journal, which was one of the large papers in the Midwest, and lots of the people that can point to that. And what makes that particular photo interesting was that it was picked up by the fire services, and then it ended up kind of going nationwide. So there was lots of information being spread about the Kickapoo Valley flood. And a very interesting story of how the reporter from Milwaukee came up here, and he went to Hillsboro, and he rented a plane, got a guy to fly over the Kickapoo Valley, and then he took photos, and as the flood was progressing down the valley, then he sent him photos and things like that. But this is kind of the iconic one. And it's interesting that all the great floods in LaFarge have that kind of angular crest in the village that you can see there from northwest to southeast.
Could you point that out? Could you point that out? I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
Like this is the flood crest here.
Oh, okay.
See that? And this would be the bank right here. Bank, and this is where the zip stop is today. And Nuzum's down here to give you an idea where things are on Main Street. Although the zip stop is now a mobile station. Just putting up the signs this morning. When will things quit changing? It's just wild. After that flood that summer drew the national attention, the representatives from the valley, and there were a whole group of them, led by the village president of LaFarge, Farge Davidson, who went to Washington to petition Congress for some kind of flood control. And it's interesting, this is during the FDR New Deal times, and the federal government is actually looking for projects to do out in the countryside to give people work and all of that kind of thing. So Congress, in 1936, included a Kickapoo Valley study in the 1936 budget. And from 1937 to 1940, representatives from the Army Corps of Engineers, and at that time the Corps of Engineers was part of the U.S. Army, very, very much so. And they came out and they studied the valley, and also people from the Department of Agriculture, and took a look at the valley. And one of the things that they came up with was that they thought a dam should be built north of LaFarge. Here is a map from 1938 that the Corps of Engineers made. I love that map. It's one of the first actual Kickapoo River watershed maps that was probably ever made like that. And it really gives you a good idea about the valley and the fact that it is in the Driftless region, and it's hills and valleys, and all that kind of thing. And so that's the kind of thing that they were looking at and creating. But of course, World War II broke out. And the Corps of Engineers had all kinds of other things they had to do all the way through the first half of the 40s, which was participating in the conflict. And then after the war, also rebuilding in Europe and in Japan. That was all a part of it. And by 1950s, the people of the Kickapoo Valley were asking the Corps, hey, could you go back to that project and possibly take a look at getting us some flood control and that kind of thing? And then there was another devastating flood in the valley in 1951. 10 people died in western Wisconsin, not all in the Kickapoo, but several in the Kickapoo, from those floods. And again, that 51 flood made national attention because there was a tremendous story about rescuing the telephone operator down in Gays Mills. She had stayed at the switchboard, calling everybody she knew to get out of the way of the flood lines. And eventually the power went off and she was going to leave, and she was up on the top story of a 2-story building, and the water was halfway up that building and she couldn't leave. They had to come in with a boat and rescue her. They had her pulled her out of actually an attic window on the structure, and they made Life magazine, which was a big deal back in the 50s, Life magazine. And so again, there's national attention to that. And the Kickapoo Zoos are again asking the federal government, can you help with this flood control program? Other bad floods in 56 and 59, and after another bad flood in 1961, Governor Nuzum and Senator Alexander Wiley asked the Corps to get back into that flood control help for the Kickapoo Valley. And in 62, Congress authorized a flood control plan for the Kickapoo Valley that included a dam at LaFarge with an 800-acre lake and levees downriver at Grove and Yates Mills. So we would stop now and take a look at this banner that you see here, because this was made by the Corps of Engineers, that time the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, for that 62 project. And the 62 project had 3 parts. It had a dam just north of LaFarge, where the present dam location is, but it was not the same dam that's over there now. This was a smaller dam. It was it didn't have a tower or anything like that. It was a kind of a dam where it just would overflow and would drain back into the river and a spillway and just that kind of thing. Any of you familiar with Lake Onalaska? That kind of thing, just spills back into the river there. And it would have been, height-wise, it would have been about, if you know where the dam is over here, it would have been about the top of that hill there without piling anything on top for this one. Now, I'm not sure this banner ever really got out, because one of the things that the Corps did was that they were going to go and take this around and show it to the community so they would know what was coming. But before they actually got to that, the Corps went to the state of Wisconsin and said, here's our project, what do you think? It's been okayed from Congress, we've got money for it, we're all ready to go. And the state goes, wait a minute, how about we make a bigger one? How about we make a bigger lake? How about we get some recreation in? All that kind of stuff. And the Corps said, ooh, a bigger project? A bigger dam? More work for us? Yes. And they started working on that. So this particular display may have been around a few places, but they didn't get it really around. And if you look at this, here's the dam is seen down here, the spillway concept of a dam right here, and the levees for Soldiers Grove and Yates Mills are over there. They're going to protect the downtown areas of those 2 villages down in Crawford County, bottom end of the river. And this kind of shows the reservoir that you would have had here, the main, and they never called it a lake. And the main body of water is just a widening of the river, about up to Rock, not quite that far. And a little going up Weister Creek, right here. But that's about it. And then during flood times, you see these other areas in the light blue, that would have indicated that they can back water up, during flood time, almost all the way to Ontario there. So they were looking at that kind of procedure to do that. Originally, in the 1940s, ideas, plans, they were looking at building a dam up by Rocky, and they were going to back the river up there. But then there was problems with that. Warner Creek would have been got backed up, that would have taken out Valley, and Ontario would have been adversely affected. So they moved it down to just north of LaFarge. Then that was going to provide flood protection for LaFarge, Viola, Reedstown, and then the two towns further down, so to speak, Gates Mills, would get the levee systems, which would protect them. Now, how do we happen to get hold of this? Last year, a package came to the Vernon County Historical Society up in Grove. Day 2, that was in it. It had been sent by the Corps of Engineers from St. Paul. They were cleaning out their closets. They found this thing, and they sent it to the museum without saying a word to me. And then, you know, Kristen Barrett is the curator up at the museum, and she's going, well, what the heck? So she called them, and they said, yeah, we just thought maybe you would like to have it. And at the time, they just happened to have a water control display kind of thing that was being passed around the state. So they said, okay, we'll just add this to it. But then Kristen said, this should really be down at the reserve. So after that display closed, then she's shipped it down here. So we're presenting it today. This is the first unveiling of it at the reserve here, and give you an idea as to what we're looking at here. And then the question came out was, well, how did you happen to send it now? And the Corps said, well, we were cleaning house and we wanted to get rid of this. And so that's how it ended down here. And it's interesting that the Friends of the Reserve have been trying to get a couple of boxes of photos and information from the Corps for years on some of the former landowners and the photos that were taken when their land was taken for the dam project, that kind of thing. And they can't find those boxes. But they did find these here, so this year. So I mean, it's a great addition to what we have here. But actually, this never happened. None of this ever happened. Because, as I said, the state of Wisconsin wanted a bigger project. And so they ran it out, and they wanted more tourism and recreation in southern Wisconsin. Everybody was going up north. That's where the lakes were. Well, if we put some lakes in down south, would they stop here? I mean, that was the idea. They were, you know, Lake Lafayette down in Grant County, and then the lakes over by LaValle. I mean, those were all being put in at that time. So the Corps and the state met, and in 1967 they came up with a new plan, which would have almost an 1,800-acre lake, 13 recreational areas around it, and they would have to have 9,000 acres for the total project. And the cost of the new project would be around $20 million, which the Corps really didn't think would be that big of a problem. They thought, you know, they would be able to get Congress to okay that, because Congress, when they okayed the 62 project, it had been kind of open-ended as to what it was going to cost. But originally, that 62 project was about $7 million, just to give you an idea as to where the prices go on this. So there's the Corps of Engineers map in 1968, and it shows Lake LaFarge, which is by this time actually being talked about. But there is going to be a lake. It's going to be a river kind of lake. But it does show it here. And then you got your flood control projects downriver. It shows you Grove and Gates Mills. So that's the 67 project, which was the one that they were going to run with. And in 1969, the Corps began the process of acquiring land for the project. The landowners were offered fair market value for property, a process that also included the federal right to eminent domain, which means if you won't sell it to us, we will take it. At that fair market value, they don't take it, they would pay for it. And they would do that through condemnation proceedings, which was done. There was several dozen of those that were done going to acquire that land. At the same time as they're getting ready to start buying the land, Congress is passing a couple of acts which are going to have immense impact on this project. 1969, the Clean Water Act was passed. And that said that for these kinds of projects like LaFarge Dam Project, you would have to meet clean water standards for the project. And the second one was the Federal Environmental Protection Act, which, among other things, said that for these projects, that the Corps was going to have to file an environmental impact statement, EIS there, for projects like the one at LaFarge. All right, and I will tell you right now, the Corps had never written an environmental impact statement ever before. Just to give you a clue how this is going to work. So in 1970, also, as this is getting going, there's some opposition to the project starts to raise questions about a couple of things: water quality in the lake and the loss of rare and endangered species. The LaFarge study from UW-Madison was very critical of the project. And the John Muir chapter of the Sierra Club, which was based in Madison, that particular chapter, called on the Corps of Engineers to reconsider the LaFarge project. The Corps' initial environmental impact statement was rejected by the Council on Economic Quality because it was awful. It was 9 pages long, and at the same time they released that initial EIS, the Corps also released a 300-page booklet on the recreation and tourism benefits of the new lake at LaFarge. 300 pages. 9 pages for the EIS was struck out big time. Just to give you an idea.
Brad?
Yes?
Was this their very first EIS?
It's virtually the first. And it is for the St. Paul office. It is for the St. Paul office. Some of the other offices had done it before and had a little idea as to how to do it. St. Paul office, no clue. Okay. And 1970 was also a year in which Crawford County boy, Patrick Lucy, was elected governor of the state of Wisconsin. And when he was running for the governor's spot, he never said boo about the LaFarge Dam Project, that he was for it or against it. He ran against Olson from Wisconsin Dells, who was a big tourism guy, and he had pretty much avoided the Farge Dam Project too in the campaigning. So it wasn't like, you know, it's pro-dam versus anti-dam or any of that kind of stuff. It didn't come up really. But at the very first cabinet meeting that the governor held in December, a month after the election, at the very first meeting, there was an agenda, and one of the items on the agenda was stopping the dam project at LaFarge. And amazing. And everybody that was at the cabinet meeting was kind of amazed too. And they had no idea how to do it. They really didn't. So, in 1971, the project is continuing now. Property is being bought. The Corps is buying. Matter of fact, this property right here is being bought at that time. They start buying the property at the dam site, and then they start headed north. So in the very first years, 70, 71, they were buying this property down here. Your place was probably getting in there. Kathy joined us late here, so I just wanted to point out, former landowner, greatly affected. Her family was greatly affected by this project. So you'd had your hand up a lot in the beginning, because they asked those questions. So in the review that the governor did, there was lots of questions that came up about the project. And the village, or the LaFarge area, basically organized into two groups. Pro-Dam, which was about 75% of the people, and anti-dam, which was about a quarter of the people. And the pro-dam group went on a letter writing campaign. And it wasn't just here, it was all over the Midwest. They got people to write letters to Governor Lucy saying, back that project. 10,000 letters arrived to Madison at his office saying, please back the project. And after the review, and after all those letters came pouring in, Governor Lucy allowed the project to continue with certain provisions, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But hey, Town of Stark, if you want to know we add zoning, that's one of the provisions. In 1971, the Sierra Club in Madison filed an injunction in federal court to stop the project. Governor Doyle, this would be Jim Doyle's father. Jim Doyle was the governor, but this is his father, James, rejected the injunction and allowed the project to continue. And here's basically why. It was an ongoing government project which had been okayed by Congress. And Congress had never said stop it. So from a legal standpoint, justices are going to rule in that way. Groundbreaking was held at the dam site in 1971. Right over there. Got out the golden shovels. Whoop. Kathy's mom, her niece, had some golden shovels. Is that still in the display area? Yeah, it is. Still there. You can see it afterwards. And construction at the dam site began. The pro-dam group, they had beaver as their mascot because beavers chop down those trees and make dams. Great. Chopping down those trees is going to get more popular as we go along here. Here is the groundbreaking ceremony. And this is actually a photo that was in the brochure that the Corps of Engineers made about the dam project and gave to the reserve. And I used it in my teaching, in my classes, and different things that I had when I was teaching here over the years. And I never really looked really closely at this picture because that's my dad. And it took me about 5 years to figure that out. I just never looked. My dad was a very non-political man, and you may have heard of C&S Motors in LaFarge, the old Chevy Buick garage down there. Well, these are the two guys that owned it, LaFarge Dam, Brad Steinmetz, and they were very much for the project. LaFarge businessmen generally were. And so somehow my dad got involved in it and got all dressed up, and there he is with, that's Congressman Thompson from the Christian Center, actually, and tipping over that first shovel there at the dam site. So the state helped LaFarge, Vernon County, and other townships to develop zoning measures. That was part of what the governor wanted. So those were set up so they could control runoff around the lake, that kind of thing. And the DNR worked with the code to develop the recreational areas around the lake. And there are going to be 13 rec areas around this lake. And create a master plan for resource management of the lake. You know, what kind of fishing you're going to do, what kind of boats do you want to allow, and all of that kind of thing. This was all being developed. The Sierra Club filed another injunction in federal court to stop the project, and Judge Doyle again rejected it. He said nothing's changed, it's still a congressional authorized project. And then they took and appealed that decision to the Court of Appeals in Chicago, and 3 judges there ruled unanimously in favor of Doyle's ruling to continue the project. So legal means didn't really stop the project. In 1973 now, and again, the construction of the dam is all taking place at this time. Property is being purchased. Where Kathy lived, that was being purchased during that time. And actually, the Corps used her house where she grew up as a headquarters for a time while this was all being done, before they moved that house to LaFarge. But everything was being done. They were finishing up, actually just about getting the dam site ready for the finishing stages over here. And so it was kind of getting almost to the point where you could create a lake. And at that time, the Corps of Engineers commissioned a water quality study for the proposed lake that was going to be done by the Environmental Studies School down in UW-Madison, and potentially water quality issues. Again, that's part of what Governor Lucy wanted. He wanted a study done. So that was going to be done. And this is kind of what the new project, this is what the dam would look like if some of you have been over there and walked around and familiar with it. And this is the water control tower here. The lake is going to be on that side. Water will run underneath this bank here and eventually back out into the river. These beautiful sandstone cliffs over on the east, this is called the east abutment here. And then basically what you had to do is fill in this, after you got this all built, is fill in this so you can start operating this as a dam. That's how close they are to concluding this particular project. Another photo shows that, you know, the water would come into that tower there and go down this trough back into the river. And in 1974, Senator Nelson, who's now against the project, interesting, as governor he was for it, even as senator he was for it. But now he's against it because of clean water standards. But he does offer a dry dam proposal. He said, you still need flood control, so let's finish the dam to help with flooding, but let's don't back up water behind it and have a lake and that kind of thing. And he also said, is it possible we could make this into a national park? Very unique land here in this driftless area. It couldn't be a national park, so he came on that. Work continued on the project. The dam was pretty much complete. The new highway, which you drove in when you came in today, around the lake is being built north of the Farge. The bridges at Rockton and Jug Creek were completed that year. And the land acquisition now kept going upriver toward Ontario. About 90% of that was complete. And now, notice the estimated cost of the project, it's almost doubled. It's up to $38 million now. And part of that is because of very high interest rates when the federal government decided they didn't want to borrow money to pay for fighting in Vietnam. That happens. So that's part of it too. An aerial photo of what the dam is going to look like. And you can see there's a road up on top. You know, they built the dam berm up on top of that hill. And they just fill in this gap. Here's the new road that you came in on this morning, coming around it. Another view, and I see it that way. And a drawing by the Corps, new beautiful Lake LaFarge, that's looking south toward LaFarge. And you see the dam tower kind of sitting out in the middle of the water there. And then feeding, and they had different gates at different levels, so they could draw off water at different levels. There was a lot of trash on the top, they could take that off, different ways of using that. And here's the reserves management building, right here. That was the Corps building back then. That was where the people who were going to be working on the dam and staying there, that's where their offices were going to be. And this is interesting, this is a spillway. Right here, that's a spillway, so that if the water got too high behind the dam, this would let water go into Plum Run and go back down into the river. Scary stat. For the water to go over the spillway and go back down into Plum Run, it would have had to be 106 feet above the river level. Yikes. Wonder about that, don't you? Anyway, that's what it was. And, yeah. 1974, 75. So the water quality study comes out from UW, and they said that the water quality would be extremely poor. As a matter of fact, the head of the study said it would be so thick you'd be able to walk across the lake at its southern end. That's thick water. The report was disputed by the state and county UW extension officials who had worked on it and did not agree with them. And those of you who lived in Bergen County for a long time, you know that UW extension is big in this county, always has been. And they had all kinds of plans in place to control nutrient runoff that would have affected the water quality, and they claimed, and in my research, quite rightly, that this study did not look at that at all. And so in 75, because of that, by the end of the year, Governor Lucey, Senator Nelson, and the Environmental Protection Agency were all asking Corps to stop the project. And in 1975, Governor Lucey created a partnership team to study the project and look for alternatives to this dam project. And the team that he put together looked at all the options. They said, here's the best option. Complete the dam and lake as authorized. That comes up a lot. Senator Proxmire in 75 and 76, he's still for the project now. These are other senators, Nelson and Proxmire. And Senator Proxmire asked the Corps for a new cost estimate, and wow, look at what we got here now. $51.5 million cost. If you remember Senator Proxmire, he was frugal. And this, of course, threw him off. And he said, oh, this does not look good. I don't know where we're going to get this in Congress. So here we are in beautiful downtown LaFarge at the old firehouse down on South Silver Street. And look at that adorable couple right there. Here we are. Senator Proxmire came to town in September, a Saturday morning meeting, and he said, I'm withdrawing my support for the project. And nobody really quite knew that he was going to do that. Got to give the guy credit. And of course, look at his, he was going bald and he was giving, what do you call those plugs? Transplant plugs, hair plugs. So you can kind of see that in the back there. I always point that out. And so here we got an almost completed dam. These are the Cross Tribune pictures because everybody's coming out to take photos of this dam. It doesn't look like it's going to be finished. And in January of 1976 was the famous proxy funeral. Got to make the big time. One more, we got to keep making the big time. So they had a funeral for Senator Proxmire down at LaFarge. This is right out in front of the Raven Bar, Twisted Raven today. And Saturday morning, hundreds of people show up. We had ladies singing hymns and all of this kind of thing. Reverend Alderson there, it's Kevin Alderson's dad, he's giving the eulogy. And here is the cadaver of Senator Proxmire, which was a mannequin. And it was actually in a coffin, and you notice it's being hauled away in a manure spreader. That was the hearse. And it's going to be hauled up to the dam project. This guy in front here was a hired mourner because they couldn't find anybody to mourn for the senator. So they hired some people to do the mourning. And up the hill we go, all the way. It's Dale Muller, Lonnie Muller. Lonnie, his dad was driving the nurse over there, and he's got two mules pushing it, which we affectionately call the Kickapoo jackasses. And they're pulling the the hearse up to the dam site, right over here. And once we got up there, they took out the cadaver and they flung it down over the dam. And Reverend Alderson goes, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Give us a senator that we can trust. And of course, guess what? That made the national news. LaFarge is back in the news again. And in '76, Congress directed the Corps to conduct another study. And they did. They offered an alternative proposal. Kind of went back to that Plan A, this one over here on that we've seen. 800-acre lake. The DNR in Wisconsin says, no, we don't want that. We want bigger. And then 77, the governor withdrew all of his support for the dam. And the Corps, by that time, been sitting on this for 5 years and can't get going anywhere. They asked Congress to deauthorize the project. And so there was a group called CLOUT, the Kickapoo Landowners United Together. These are the former landowners, like Kathy's folks, who are looking at getting their land back. If you're not going to have a lake, can we have our land back? And that was formed to see if that could happen. 78, the DNR offered to buy all of these lands from the federal government. That was very unpopular here in the valley because the people are trying to get the land back, and the DNR says, no, we'll take it. DNR came out a big villain in this. If you want to know why some of us old fogies still hate the DNR. Anyway, so we're going to hear. And they offered to buy the dam lands, and that wasn't going to go. And then in '78, we got hit with another devastating flood, the largest in the history, one of the largest in the history. We go out to the Discovery Center, take a look at the flood pole, it's shown here. So you got this huge unfinished dam here and this huge flood that went through at the same time. And here's Sealyburg, right down over the hill here, during that flood. It's right by the hotel, walking across the street there, Snow Street. Carolyn and I lived in an apartment right there. Not for very long, though. We had to get everything moved out of our apartments. Once we got to move back in, we said, we're going to look for higher ground. Found some of them there. Still there. And then, once again, we draw national attention because in October, Friday the 13th, we were on the LaFarge Dam Project. It was on the CBS News, nationwide. And it was called The Great Kickapoo Loggerhead, was the name of the piece. And at the very end, Bob Faw from Chicago, who narrated the piece, said, an unfinished dam stops no water. No kidding. And so in '79, now the wilderness years, this refers to the time when the dam project is not going anywhere, but this land just sits out here and is going back toward wilderness. It's not being farmed. Some parts are being farmed, but most of it is not. So that's referred to as wilderness years. It also kind of refers to kinds of stuff that was going on out here, which was pretty wild. And Governor Dreyfus called for a dry dam, have a new study, all that kind of stuff. Congressman at that time, Steve Gunderson, same thing. Should we have a dry dam? All of that kind of stuff. He finally came up with the called the dry dam, wet dam proposal. Build the dam so you use it for flood control, and then at a later time, when you get this all figured out, maybe you could create a lake. That was his idea. And then 83, the Corps proposed a modified dry dam, and that was dropped because the Corps cost-benefit ratio, which is all part of that. The Corps finally in 84 said, we just shouldn't move forward in any form. In 86, another governor, Tony Earl, appoints the dam study group, and they called for reach to the dam, the lake, as proposed, and both federal and state authorities said, no, not going to work. And in '87, Vernon County, the town of Stark, and the farming property owners initiated a lawsuit against the federal government to complete the project. And that took a lot of money and took a lot of time, a couple of years, and it never went anywhere. Because even at this point, Congress is still authorizing some money to the Corps for this project, just to maintain the land, which they basically didn't do, and kind of keep the project going. So as long as there's still money going out, the project is still alive, so you can't get your land back. And after 2 years, the county spent $40,000 on it. They said, no, we're going to drop this. So in 1981, Governor Tommy Thompson, who's another local boy, comes from Elroy. He comes and he says, excuse me, he decided they were going to have an economic development project here in the Kickapoo Valley to include disposition of the dam project. And Al Anderson, who was a guy that worked for UW Extension, was named the project coordinator. He came in and started up a valley-wide advisory committee, and they were to look at the LaFarge project, among other things. There was other things going on. And a subcommittee was formed to specifically look at the dam project plans. You got these 9,000 acres, almost 9,000 acres out here. What do you want to do with it? And in 1993, the concept of the Kickapoo Valley Reserve came forward, and it was to be used for recreation and education. And it won nearly unanimous consensus at the federal, state, and local level. Finally, a plan that pretty much everybody was behind. And in 1994, Governor Thompson came back, and he signed the Kickapoo Valley Reserve Bill, right in the gym down here in LaFarge. I think I have a picture of it. There he is, signing the bill there, and creating the Kickapoo Valley Reserve. And after he got done signing it, he went out and canoed Kickapoo. He hadn't done that before, so he did that. The reserve was created. Then they had to get Congress to okay it. So the state is saying, turn this land over to us and we'll create the reserve. Congress goes, okay, we think we can, we're not sure. We have to offer the land to other agencies before we can do that. And guess what? One of the other agencies, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, had an interested entity, the Ho-Chunk Nation. Because in the history of the Ho-Chunk Nation, this is where they have been, here in the Kickapoo Valley. And they were very interested in coming up and perhaps having some of these acres, or maybe all of these acres, as Ho-Chunk land. And of course, they didn't really know what they had. They had all these stories that their elders told about the Kickapoo Valley, but they didn't really quite know where anything was. And so they started sending their elders and their historians down, and they met with local people and went around and were shown, mounds and petroglyphs and all kinds of things that were in the area. And so they came up with the idea, yeah, we would be interested in the land. They didn't want it all. They decided that they would have 1,200 acres of the 9,000 would be designated as Ho-Chunk land. And that would be basically, they wanted to keep it exactly as the rest of the land, no development, and just have a place where people could go out for recreation and education and those kinds of things. And then this new board that was going to be created for the KVR would have 2 members of the Ho-Chunk Nation on the board. So in 2000, the land was transferred over to the state, and in 2001, we had this dedication ceremony right out here. This building was here at the time, right out here. And those are board members and different ones that are out there, the whole chunk are invited. And they were here, and here's their drummers and dancers. It's really an interesting day because the LaFarge High School was excused, and all the students were bussed up, and the LaFarge High School band played, and the LaFarge High School band would play, and the whole chunk would applaud for them, and then the drummers of the whole chunk would start, and they started doing the dance, and the LaFarge band would kind of going back and forth. It was really an interesting entertainment thing. And another thing that was really interesting about it was that Marcy West, who was the newly designated executive director to this reserve, she decided that we're going to have arranged seating out front for the program. And she went along and she put name tags on the seats, and she had former landowner, Ho-Chunk Elder, former landowner, Ho-Chunk Elder. And so these people started talking to each other. And they got to saying, wow, we're in the same boat here. The federal government took the land from us back in the 1800s. They took the land from you in the 1970s. We're in the same boat here. And friendships were made there, and they continued through the lifetimes of many of those people. And I can remember that James Billings lived up on Weester Creek, and he and some of the Ho-Chunk elders, they would always get together when they would come down and talk stuff. And he would take that, James would take them out and show them stuff, and then they would take James and show him other stuff that he didn't know existed. Very interesting program itself. There is the new board, and some of the politicians involved. You may remember that tall guy in the back there. Is that a former Oktoberfest king? I believe it is. And we had another flood. Here's a 2008 flood, because we still have another niche dam over here in the downtown LaFarge. And visitor center is up by them, so that's what the flood looks like with the visitor center off in the distance there. And here's the dam tower, stopping no dam water. And the flood kind of arcing around the side of it. And I really like this photo. It's a drone photo that's taken of the Organic Valley headquarters. But if you look to the north, you can see the dam tower. Right there. So you kind of get an idea. It's kind of two entities within the village. You have the OV now, and then the former land. And then if you stop up at Rockton sometime, you can see this. Rockton Bar, by the way, not just anywhere in Rockton. This is out in the barbecue pit there. And this baby was made for all politicians who didn't get the dam project finished. And by the way, that is the south end of a horse walking north, in case you're wondering what the diagram is, in case you're wondering this. And its memory of those who sold this down the river. Actually, there's another one of these that are it's in LaFarge, and it's going to be coming out in a display here in the next year, I think. Anyway, that's it, folks. Any questions?
So in 1993, when the team was formed to say, what are we going to do with this? Was there discussion of returning the land to the prior landowners?
There was.
And
There definitely was.
why did that not?
And it basically couldn't be done because the first thing you have to do if you do that is you have to offer the land to other agencies in the federal government. And that's when the Ho-Chunk and that came forward. But then there's another part. If nobody at the federal level wants it, then you have to offer it to state agencies. Well, the state of Wisconsin pretty well had that tied up. But if they don't want it, then you have to actually offer it to the counties. And the county may have taken it. But anyway, that's kind of what stopped it. Couldn't get that going. Other questions? Yeah.
You said start creating your zoning. I assume other townships at least started their zoning.
They did.
So what happened? They didn't pass the limit.
Well, Village of LaFarge passed theirs. Village of Ontario passed theirs and put it on the top shelf and never used it again for 35 years. No, virtually they didn't. LaFarge did. LaFarge adopted their zoning and kept it in place. Starks was actually a document that basically dealt with lakefront property. That's basically all it dealt with. And that could have been just put up on the top shelf. But in Stark, they started redoing it. And over the years, they have updated it. And so that's still in place. Whitestown, the township to the north, they had zoning ordinance in place, but they never got it passed. And still don't to this day. So that's kind of where we're at with those.
Did Webster ever consider?
What's that?
Webster Township.
No, they didn't. That's kind of.
They didn't care.
Yeah.
Was the Nosa and Creeper Dams part of the project? Were the Nosa part of that project, or were they?
Oh, in the Ontario area? Well, there was actually going to be 5 retention dams built by the county extension office, and those were 2. And there was also going to be one on Weister Creek, Chub Creek in the Rockton area, and Warner Creek going off Fort Valley. So yes, they were, and no, they weren't built. They were part of the project though. So that kind of interesting to me that they showed those 2 dams, but the county extension office would have told you, wait a minute, we have 5 dams we're looking at. So they didn't get those quite in there. Yeah.
When the land transferred to the Ho-Chunk Nation and the DNR, did they have to purchase it or was it given?
It never went to the DNR. Nothing ever went to the DNR. It went to the state.
To the state?
Yeah, and went to the KDR. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there a purchase price involved though, or?
Yes.
What was it?
Well, no. And there was a purchase price involved in the fact that the federal government had to promise to finish the road, which was from Ontario to Rockton. That was part of it. And they also had to help with creating that part of D that runs from Highway 82 down toward Kickapoo River down at Bridge 14. Do you know where that is? You had to put in a new section of the county trunk there, so they did that. And then that was basically that. The state said they would take care of this building. I mean, they built this building. But the federal government said they would get those roads finished up. And they did. Other news? Yeah.
Brad, you've really had like a front seat to this whole historical experience, and in addition to being a teacher about it and an educator in our community. What was it like for you moving through that as a citizen and a person in the community?
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting as a teacher at LaFarge High School, I couldn't talk about it because it was so controversial. I had a social problems class where we did debates, and in 73 or 74, we had a debate on the dam project. And one of the young men who was on the side that was against the dam because of environmental concerns, ended up being sick that day, so they didn't have their spokesman, so I kind of subbed in for him. And one of the girls in the class went home and told her dad, who was president of the village, Mr. Steinmetz is against the dam project. And the superintendent came and got me, and we went down to the village president's office, and I explained what had happened. And the gave us and says, okay, that's what we're doing. The next day, we were going to finish up the debate, and all the members of the school board were waiting in my classroom. Yeah, so we did the debate, and they were very involved, they really liked it and all that kind of stuff. And they got all done and dismissed the class. The president of the school board came up to me and says, I don't think we have to have a special meeting Friday. Oh, okay, that's good. But maybe you shouldn't be teaching this. So I didn't. And it's interesting, when I was teaching it up here on the reserve area summit, mostly for teachers, I had one of my former students who taught over in Leesburg. And she said, I'm taking the class so I can find out something about the dam project, because you wouldn't talk about it in your class. And eventually what happened was I got into independent studies, and some of the students started really getting into it, and started to actually come out on this land, and this was before the reserve was created, and started doing projects out here, environmental projects. And Luke Zahn is a classic example. He's on the board of this DNR now, or DNR, KDR now, but he and a buddy of his, they had for their senior project in our outdoor education class, they came up here and there was a big trough that ran up this hill where the ATVs and everything had been ripping, and four-wheel drive pickups and everything had ripped a trough up and down the hill there, and they filled it in and beautiful, you know. And they spent a lot of time on it, and that's how he really got interested in the reserve. He's back here on the board now, so, yeah. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate everybody.